Okay, so the next thing we're going to work on is this granite texture here. Let's see if textures.com has anything we can use. Let's type in granite, see what we get. It's going to be kind of like this, right? Okay, well let's see if we can make that one work. So, where are we here? I'm going to do this, save it. Okay. Stone, granite. Paste this in there. Open with Photoshop. Okay, we're going to need to make this seamless as well. And get rid of most of the saturation. Okay, so we have this texture, so first we're just going to make this seamless, so we can use this, turn those off. This is locked and I don't want to unlock it, I want to keep that there in case I need to go back to it if I do something wrong. Do Control J, and then let's see what happens if we offset this. So if we come in and just do, I don't know, 400, that's fine. I'm just looking at the color difference here, and there doesn't really seem to be a lot. So let's try 800. Okay, that's good. And I'm going to press J, which is the same as pressing this one, and I've got content away here. I'm going to press Control Alt right click and just adjust the size of this, and then I'm just going to come down here and make these edges disappear. Now sometimes when you do this you get a new edge on these edges here, so you just have to check that. I don't see any new edges here, and there could be a line here. You see that sharp line there, so we're just going to get rid of that like that, and this one down here like that. I think that's all we need to do. Okay, so now we've made this seamless, what we need to be doing is getting this ready to put into the scene. So I've put this hue saturation on, and I've set this down low, and I'm going to make it brighter, something like this. Now what you need to be thinking with here is you don't want to make it completely white or completely black. If you make it completely white, you're going to be bringing all that GI into the scene, and if you make it completely, basically if you make it completely white, what's going to happen is it's going to say, okay, reflect 100% of the GI. So it's going to make, reflect isn't the right word there to use, but it's going to make all the light that comes off it bounce back into the scene. And if you make it black, it's going to absorb all the light. So proper black is around 7 or 8, and proper white is around 220. So what we want to be doing here is, setting up something like this. This is pretty white, and this is pretty dark, but it's not going to be messing with the GI in ways you don't like. And then also this color, like we could take out more of this color, but if we actually look at the image, here, then you'll see it has a bit of color here, and here, and here. There's a little bit of pink going on there. So what we could do is come over to this, because there's probably too much pink in this, and we can put this on, drag this down, and then let's just brush, just do Control I, invert that, and then just make sure this is white on the top here, and just brush out areas. And I'm going to press X to get some black in. I want some more color in there, and we're going to put it in areas like this. And then what we're going to do is use that same mask and just make these areas a little bit brighter, somewhere like that. If this was going on a big surface, this wouldn't work, because you'd see this patch again and again and again, and it would clearly be there, so you don't want that. What you do want to be doing is, let's save this out, and for this we've got small areas, so it's going to work, I'm pretty sure. Let's call this Granite New. And 10 is normally enough on the quality. You want to be keeping the sizes down to a degree, so you don't, just use up all of your memory storing textures. Alright, so what we want to do, let's get another Uvw material over here. And let's assign this to these. You've got an option here to propagate materials to instances, and with this one it means this will go to all of the instances of this item. So we're going to do that. Turn that on, and now all of these have that on. And this is my granite material. Let's call this tile material, and we can call this one granite material. Oops. And then what we want to do is just grab that granite, drag that over here, put it onto here in the diffuse, make it visible, take this, use real world scale, view this, like what size are we going to make this? And I'm going to probably make it about 2 meters by 160. And you see what I mean here about this tiling, and you can clearly see this. So we don't have to worry about it too much. So we'll take one of these and we're going to put a Uvw map on. And then we're going to make it a box and real world scale. Alright, and we can see all of this tiling, and there's various options here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put an Unwrap Uvw on top. And I'm going to open the UV editor. And I'm going to come here and I'm just going to turn that on and Control A, select everything. And what we're going to do is just click on one of these buttons over here. You turn off rescale if you like, so it doesn't rescale it. And rotate's going to, you can put rotate on, it can rotate it if it likes. And just say pack it together. And now it's packed them individually, you see? So everything's packed. And if I come out of unwrap mode, you'll see that these now no longer tile. Alright, I don't like this green, but it's not going to get rid of it easily because it's just showing where the unwrap is. So if I put an edit poly on top, that'll disappear. And we can see what we have. Alright, so that's pretty nice. Now, what we're going to need, if I press M to open the material editor, is these edges right now are super sharp. And if I press F9 to do a render here, alright, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to turn off displacement in the render settings. If I open up the rendered box by clicking on this button, a rendered dialog, so to speak, go to V-Ray, I can just turn off displacement here. And that's not going to displace anymore, and I can come over here and I can up this to like 6,000. And then what I actually want to do is I want to do a region here so you can see what I'm doing. And so we're going to do this, or actually I can do this region. And we're just going to render that. Alright, now you see how sharp these edges are. And that's not the best. We don't want those to be super sharp like that. So I'm just going to stop this here. Now what we're going to do is rather than put a chamfer on, we're going to do it in the material. So I'm going to come here and go V-Ray blend material. And put this up to there. And I'm actually, let's get a noise map. I often use Burker noise, but I'm not going to demand you guys download it. So I'm just going to come in here and we're just going to use a noise map, plug that straight into the diffuse. And what I can do, if you look here, this high, that means 1. If I bring this down, it brings the light areas, makes white. So it goes, okay, so 0.7 now is perfectly white. And if I put this up, it increases the contrast. It brings more black into the scene. So we can come up here like this, and I don't really like this perfectly smooth areas like that, so I can turn on fractal, or I can turn on turbulence. You can see the difference there. And now if I render, because I put this straight into the diffuse, because I have no idea what size this is, right? But if I press F9, okay, so that's completely black. So that's not going to work, is it? So instead we come to this noise, and let's lower the size down to 100. And so now we see these areas coming through, these patches coming through. Let's bring this down, 0.5 and 0.2, and press escape and F9. Okay, good. So we're getting somewhere. And then we need a second noise map. And see how here it's very smooth on the edges here. So we can turn up the levels. If I put this up to like 7, it means it has 7 layers of noise on top of each other. By default it's got 3, and we should see a lot more detail coming in here. And so that's better, that's more what I want. So we're going to just stop that, and then we'll take the second one here, which is basically the same as that. We'll put on fractal. Oh, sorry. Let's put this one here. Let's put that back on turbulence, and take this one and put this one on fractal. All right. And now, so now if I render this, let's see what we get. Okay, I'm getting too much white, not enough black. So this low is going to have to come up to 0.4. Oh, that's 0.5. 0.4. And let's just see what we get. Press escape. Press F9. Press render. Okay, good. Perfect. Fantastic. All right. So now we've got these mapped the way I like them. What we're going to do is put this in here. And I'm not going to take this. Sometimes you see people and they take this and they put this into the bump, or they use a variation of this in the bump, and they use a variation of it in reflection and variation in reflection glossiness. And sometimes that's appropriate, especially with metals. But in this case, what's happened is they've taken a sheet of granite and then they've polished it. So imagine there's no imperfections on this as far as the granite shape is. There's a possibility that, you know, some of these bumps are little holes. Sometimes you're looking into granite and you get these little gouges where they are, but it'll only be some of them and occasionally, and it won't be all of this black area. So there is things I could do to get it so it's just in a few. Yeah, maybe we do that. Because sometimes you want it, but just in a couple. So what I would do is I'll come in here and take this, and then basically push this up, and bring this down. Let's put one of these here. So we end up with something like that, and then we might go put an exposure and have something like that. Okay, and that's our bump. So if we do that, what we're going to have to do is take out the blur. So we can go on there, and then, sorry, if I double click on this bitmap, the blur here is set at 0.1. So if I drop this down to 1. If I drop it down to 0.1, then that'll get rid of most of that blur. And what that blur does is it makes it so you don't get artifacts from the JPEG coming through, and that's the purpose of it. And that's particularly useful if you have a small resolution image and you're using it in a render, then you don't particularly want to be taking that blur away. But in this case, we don't need to do that. Like, you know, it's not high resolution, it's 1600 by 1138, but it's not particularly low resolution either. So we'll get away with this. All right. And then the bump, you know, 10 or 15 should be fine. Now there's a chance you're not going to even see this in the render, in which case why bother putting it in? And I kind of agree with that. There's no point in putting it in if you don't see it, but we're trying to make this material look pretty nice. It look pretty cool. So sometimes you get carried away with creating materials and you forget that you only need to see what you need to see in the render. So we're going to take this reflection and we're just going to whack that up there. And reflective glossiness is at 1.0. And if we look at the photo, there's not really a lot of reflective glossiness that we can see on here. It doesn't particularly mean there isn't any. It just means we can't see it. It could be because the conditions in the scene don't really set it, you know, don't really set it up so that you can see it. Like if you look here, you can see it clearly on the floor, but we cannot see any glossiness on this. So we're going to lower this down. Let's try 0.55. And I'm going to turn off this lock on for now, because there's not a lot going on here, and I'll put that at 2.5. And that could be a bit much, but we'll see. Maybe we adjust that later, but for now that's pretty cool. Now imagine these have been touched over time continually. There's been a lot of touching and various things happening. So what we're going to want is, let's get some dirt maps in here. So we can just go for a grunge map. It can be anything. I normally think it's easier to create these, to be honest, than take one that exists. You know, like, that doesn't really have any use in what we're doing. And neither does that, but that could be a good one to start with. So I'm just going to open this Photoshop, and what I'm going to do is just do Control J and filter blur, Gaussian blur, set this to 10. I'm basically trying to get rid of a lot of this variation that's going on. Set this to 20. Actually, let's do this at 10, and then we can bring in the curves. You want to sort of be selective where you have, you know, where things are happening and where you have variation. You don't want it just occurring everywhere, so that's pretty good. But you can see it's interesting, isn't it? Because even though this is an exact duplicate of this, you don't really see it that much when you look at it until you put these effects on. So what we're going to do is just take this one, and I'm just going to press J again, which is this one over here, spot healing brush, and I'm just going to come in here and just paint some of these out a bit, just so it doesn't look exactly the same. If you can hear a noise there, that'll be my dog in the background chewing on its bone. Anyway, so this is seamless now, and I can save this out, and we can use this. We can use this in either reflective or reflective glossiness. All right. I'm just going to drag and drop this in here, and let's try this into reflective glossiness. And I'm going to get rid of some of this blur, not loads, but some. Alright, if I select this and click on this button, it'll show it on the material. And then I can use real world scale. And again, looking at this, I'm going to make it like 2 meters by 2 meters. Let's try. Let's try 1 meter by 1 meter, because these have been unwrapped, it could work out quite well. Let's try 800 by 800. Okay, I kind of like that. That looks good. And then what I'm going to do, if you look here, if I open preview window of this, you can see the effect this is having. And that's not really the effect I want it to have. So what we're going to do is come here into the material, and take this reflective glossiness. I'm going to knock this down to 20. So now it's 20% the map, and the rest is the material itself. So there's that variation going on, but it's subtly. And sometimes what I do is I'll put this into reflective map as well, and then I'll do the same. I can just put that down to 20. And sometimes I'll go below 20. Just take that off. Alright. So now I want to see this one on there, so I know what the hell I'm doing. And we're going to select this, and I'm going to assign this one to it. Alright, so this is your V-Ray blend material. So the base material has no bump on these edges. And it's very simple material. So we're going to take this and just shift, click, and drag, put this into coat 1. And coat 1's going to be this one. So I use this as the blend. Alright, so you want to go to your maps and look at your V-Ray maps, and you want V-Ray edges texture. Just double click on that, drag that over, bring it over here, and then set this. And I'm going to set the radius on this to 3 millimeters. Actually, let's do 2 millimeters. Okay, and then I'm going to just drag this, come out, let go, do maps, do general, and I'm going to do a composite map, and this can be layer 1. And this is going to go into the bump slot. And then double click on this, and then add in an extra layer. And then basically I want this bump to be in here as this extra layer. And so now I'm just going to click on this, I'm going to press Control, click on this and this, so I've got these 3 selected. Drag this down, click on this edges texture, and make this radius here 10. And I only want this in some areas. And then drag this up to coat 3, and we're going to use this one here into blend 2. Sorry, coat 2 and blend 2. So what we've got is we've got by default a very sharp edge, and then we've got a 2mm edge where these white bits are, and then we've got a 10mm edge where these white bits are. So now, if I just render this, hopefully we'll see that variation occurring. So you see here, it looks different to here. Okay, I think this 10 is a bit much here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to make this smaller. Let's take this size down to 100. And take this edges texture, and I'm going to drop this down to 6. Alright, let's check that again. Okay, let's stop this. I want to have a look at what's going on up here. I just want to see this clearly. So I like that. It looks kind of more worn here, and here less worn. And in some areas this is going to be completely sharp. But that's what we want. We want that variation going on. So that's nice. And I'm just going to lower this down, this size, just for my test. I'm going to put this down to 1500. And I'm just going to render this. I like how this is looking. I'm not sure where this light is coming from on this side. I'm imagining that's coming through these windows. And the reason it's only on these edges is because these walls here are blocking it. So we'll have to see if that stays there in the future or what happens. But I like the way this is coming along here.